64K Retro Gaming Goodness.
Hey, Bastich B here for 64K and welcome to vlog number 38, July 2022.
Welcome to 64K. Hosted by Bastich B.
So the first order of business, if you've never watched one of these vlogs before, it's basically me giving updates on the channel, what's coming up, maybe some special announcements, that kind of thing. I haven't done one of these in a while, but there's been a lot of new subscribers. And on that note, I finally went over the 10,000 mark. I know this was a couple months ago, but it happened about 10,500 or something like that. I've lost track, to be perfectly honest. I don't know how much it is right now, but I reached the goal. That was the whole goal of the channel right from the beginning. Appreciate everybody that's joined in the last few months, and obviously everybody that was here before that. It's awesome. Never thought a Commodore 64 channel like my small little one could reach that kind of heights, which is amazing. Also a special shout out to all the Patreons out there that help support this channel, even in the smallest way. You can also be one of them for as little as $2 a month, as much as a McDonald's coffee. You can contribute just a little bit and get access to videos way earlier, sometimes a month before or a few weeks before everybody else, and that kind of thing. And thank you again everybody that is a Patreon, and if you're interested, please check it out. Okay, so this vlog has two parts to it. The first part I'm going to talk about is all the new shows I'm going to be introducing, and the second is a Q&A. I've already reached out to everybody on social media platforms and asked if they'll contribute questions to the channel, and I'll answer them here. I've gathered them all up, so we'll go through those at the end. But the first part is me talking about all the new shows that are going to be introduced on 64K. So, like I've said in previous vlogs, I don't want this channel ever to become stale, or whether it's, I'm not going to be basically coasting on one type of video or two types of videos. I want massive diversity, and that's what I like, that's what I enjoy. When it comes to retro gaming, I like a little bit of everything. Commodore 64 will always be number one, do not fear. But there's going to be a lot of other stuff introduced, just stuff that I like, that I've just never been able to put on this channel up until this point, but it's all going to be introduced here. Over the next 3 months, I got 6 new different series that are going to be introduced. So, as per usual, all the old shows will continue, making episodes for them. They'll be out whenever, and these new ones will just be added to the list. It gives me a little bit of diversity, which I like, and it gives you a bit of variety, which I think most people would appreciate. Okay, so let's first run through the names of all the new shows, all 6 of them, so you can get some sort of idea of what they are, and then I'll explain them. I'm still working on them, so I tend to forget. Let me consult my notes. We got 16-bit Days, Commodore 64 Deep Cuts, Tales of a Dungeon Basher, Generation 6, FMV Overload, and Sidetrack Reviews. Okay, so let's start off with the 2 that are actually going to be released this month in July. The first one up is Commodore 64 Deep Cuts, and another one will also be 16-bit Days. Both of these are obviously coming out in July, so you'll see them pretty soon. 16-bit Days is similar to Player One Memories, where I'm looking back at games from the 90s, from the 16-bit era, home console 16-bit era, in particular Genesis Mega Drive and Super Famicom and Super NES. I'm focusing just on those 2 systems as the 16-bit Days series, because I find when you make series too broad, you just can't focus on anything, and games just kind of just get lost in the shuffle, and you never end up getting any sort of goal as to what you were trying to achieve. So this is very specific. The Mega Drive / Genesis is the system that I used to own in the 90s, and I absolutely love that thing. And as far as 16-bit gaming goes, I played so much. There's so many games I love. On the other hand, the Super Nintendo or Super Famicom is a system I never owned until the late 90s, until I came to Canada. And then I got a Super Famicom. I found one really cheap, and I started just playing import games. And I got to really like that system as well, but it feels a little bit more in retrospect. So it's going to be interesting. I'll be jumping back and forth each episode between a Mega Drive and a Super Nintendo game, so you'll see a little bit of variety there. There's also a guest in each episode. The guest will kind of give one of their favorite games as well, so it'll be like a little bit of a segue in the middle of the show just to give a little bit more variety in it, but it should be pretty fun. And here's the actual intro for 16-bit days. In the early 90s, I made that leap from my beloved 8-bit to the 16. It was the start of a whole new look and sound. This is the story of my 16-bit days. And the other show coming out this month is Commodore 64 Deep Cuts. So what you can surmise from that title is I'm going to be looking at games that are a little bit below the surface of the Commodore 64 spectrum, and there is a lot because the library is so ridiculously big. And that's another thing why this series is going to be focused on kind of second tier or a little bit more obscure titles. Games that I feel don't get talked about that much anymore or at all. So these are the games I'm going to focus on. Again, it's going to be laser focused, just so you can actually, accomplish things. I've covered a ton of Commodore 64 games, tons and tons of them. Most of them are obviously much more well-known games, at least generally speaking. So these are going to be a little bit more under the radar. If you're a veteran, you're going to know these games anyway, but you probably haven't heard anybody speak about them for a very long time, or maybe like ever. So this is a fun series as well. If you're a Commodore 64 guy and you like that kind of thing, you're going to really dig it. There's a couple episodes I've already made. The Patreons have had access to that. But let me show you the intro for this show so you get a little bit of a taste of what this one is like. Looking back into the Commodore 64's library reveals many games. More games than any other computer or system ever made. And with that, too many great titles got lost in the shuffle. This series is dedicated to highlighting these forgotten gems. Welcome to Commodore 64 Deep Cuts. And the next two shows are called Tales from a Dungeon Basher and Generation 6. So Tales from a Dungeon Basher, as you can obviously surmise, is going to be an RPG-based series. My Commodore 64 RPG video is one that just constantly gets watched. It's super popular. It's one of the most popular videos I've ever made. I kind of knew it was going to be when I made it because there's virtually no coverage of this genre on YouTube for whatever reason. I have no idea why. But anyway, there's so much games on there that I would like to go deeper into because I just scratched the surface and there were so many that I left off that list. But Tales of a Dungeon Basher is going to be RPGs in general. I'm talking mainly 8 and 16-bit. I'm going to be covering basically 80s and 90s stuff. I might do some other ones, later ones, but that's generally speaking what it's going to be. First episode will obviously be a Commodore 64 one, and then after that I'm going to jump to a 16-bit one, and then back to an 8-bit, 16, 8-bit, 16, kind of like that. So each episode will have, either or. So it gives a nice little bit of variety. There's so many good RPGs to talk about, and I'm really looking forward to this one. Here's basically the intro for the show for you to check out. Welcome, fellow adventurers, and join me, Bastich B, as I'll be exploring classic RPGs from the 8 and 16-bit generations, both console and computer, whether it be high fantasy or lo-fi sci-fi. All roads will eventually lead to Tales of a Dungeon Basher. And the other show that's going to debut probably in August, this is the same time as Tales from a Dungeon Basher roughly, is going to be called Generation 6. This is covering the later console era where, kind of original Xbox, PS2, GameCube and Dreamcast era. That is an era which I absolutely loved. and I soaked up and I played everything basically like a madman. I was like hardcore at that point, and I was just enjoying these just new 3D experiences and how everything was changing. So this series is going to be celebrating that. Again, this is going to do kind of 2 games each episode and 2 games on a certain system. First episode will be 2 PS2 games, and then I don't know what the next episode, it might be 2 Dreamcast, 2 GameCube, 2 original Xbox. And I'm kind of pairing up the games in similar genres, so you get 2 of the same games in the kind of the same genre, so you get a little bit of a theme going. Lots of cool games to talk about, lots of games I've wanted to showcase on this channel forever. I've got my whole room set up to record these kinds of systems, and I've never used it at all. Now's the time. And here's the intro for Generation 6.
Introducing Generation 6, a series dedicated to exploring the Dreamcast, GameCube, PlayStation 2 and original Xbox, and looking at titles from the 6th generation of console gaming, circa 1998 to 2005. And now over to your host, Bastich B, as he introduces today's games.
And the last 2 that are going to be introduced are FMV Overload and Sidetrack Reviews. I don't have intros made for these ones yet, they're all planned though. This was coming out in about 2 or 3 months time, these ones, but it's all part of the onslaught of new shows. So what these ones are about, FMV Overload, as you can tell, it's about FMV games specifically. I am a huge fan of FMV games. I know these games are either loved or hated. I personally don't really care. I love them, and I'll just admit it. I'm a sucker for a good old FMV game. I'm going to be covering obviously Sega CD, Mega CD stuff, obviously, and I'm going to be covering PC stuff and that kind of thing. Those 2 systems probably had the biggest onslaught of FMV games in the 90s. There's not going to be any time frame for FMV games because I feel that there was a specific time when these were popular, and there's a gold mine of stuff to mine there. But there's also been some recent ones that have been actually really good and pushed the genre forward a little bit. So it's going to be a mixture of both. If you like FMV games basically, you should like this series. And the other series is called Sidetrack Reviews. So this is something a little bit different. I don't know how this is going to play out, but if it plays out the way it is in my mind and the way I've got it planned, then it's actually going to be very interesting. This is going to be for all you gamers out there that are pretty open-minded and diverse in your gaming. If you only play one thing, then you're probably not going to like this, and that's perfectly okay. But Sidetrack Reviews is I'm going to take one game. It's going to usually be a modern indie game, some of those cool ones that are throwbacks to the old arcade days or throwbacks to 8 or 16-bit games. And I'm going to be playing that, and every time I feel there's something nostalgic that is a throwback to an older game, we're going to segue into the throwback and look at the old game. So it's going to be a review with reviews. So it's going to be reviewing one game, but you're going to be seeing and basically having mini reviews of about another 3 or 4, maybe 5 other games, just depending on what's nostalgic about this one. So it's going to be pretty interesting to watch. Again, if you're a gamer that is pretty diverse, you're going to really like this. If you only like one type of thing, you're probably not. But I feel it's going to be a fun show to check out anyway. Okay, so now we're on to the Q&A section of this video. So I posted a question, like if anybody wanted to ask questions of the channel or myself. I posted on all my social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, the YouTube community channel, just everything. And I got a whole bunch here that I'm going to go through. I'm going to go through whichever media platform it was posted on to make it simpler, except the first one, which was by a person that posted questions on my Twitter and Patreon. So URS Retro, this guy's a recent Patreon subscriber, I noticed, and he asked a couple of questions here. So let's start with his Twitter question, which is, your top 5 retro gaming systems in order. Commodore 64 is number 1. Let's get that out the way. That's no questions. That was obvious. Okay, so number 2, favorite console or gaming system would be the Sega Saturn. That is almost solely based on its ridiculously good Japanese library and the amount of insanely good games out there that you can get. And you can get them for really good, cheap prices. But the Saturn was just a system I absolutely loved. There's so many hidden gems, it's ridiculous, and it doesn't get the respect it deserves. Number 3 would be a Sega Mega Drive. This is the system I owned after my Commodore 64. Right at the tail end of still playing C64 games, I got that, and that introduced me to 16-bit gaming, and it just blew my mind. And there's so much nostalgia and awesomeness related to that system. So number 4 would be a PC, but a PC from the 90s, DOS era PC, like kind of a 486, 386, something like that. Something that can play all those classic kind of point and click adventure games and RPGs and those things that just made the PC something completely different than what consoles were doing. And I love that. I love that kind of diversity. I was playing Mega Drive and PC games at that time. Crazy. They were so different, but I loved both of them. And number 5 would be a Sega Dreamcast. Again, this is a system that when I first got to Canada, it launched as I got here. I got here just in time to pre-order one, and I got it immediately, day one. Couldn't believe the jump ahead that system took. Not only in terms of like just graphics and everything, but just in terms of the things it was trying to do, which it actually did successfully before anything else, at least on consoles. Online gaming, all this other crazy stuff it did. Amazing system with a absolutely crazy library of games. If you include all the Japanese stuff too, it's insane. What a system. So those are my personal favorites. And let me consult my notes here for his second question. He asked, what's your favorite RPG, text, platformer, and strategy game on the Commodore 64? Wow. Going for the deep cuts here. Not messing around. I like it. But I've covered RPGs in the top 10 before, so that's should be easy. But the top few RPGs on the Commodore 64, I kind of flip-flop which is my favorite, to be perfectly honest. I made that video, and if I made it any other day, it might not have had the number 1 game be number 1. It might have had the number 2 be number 1. You know what I mean? It's so close. So I'm just going to say my favorite 3 RPGs on the C64, and you can say whatever you want. Legend of Black Silver, Ultima 6, and Wasteland. So between those, that's my favorite. As far as text adventure goes, including graphic text adventures, same thing, just has graphics. Because plain text adventure games, just the ones that only have text, like Zork and that, those are interesting, but I never got into them as much as graphic text adventure games. I need that little bit of graphical touch to suck me into something. So I would say Guild of Thieves for the Commodore 64 is my favorite, my Magnetic Scrolls, and favorite platformer, very easy, the Great Gianna Sisters on the C64. It's the best platform game. I mean, if you're talking I'm only talking about retro here, I'm not talking about modern C64 games. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about here. And the last one is strategy game. This is kind of hard to say because there's different types of strategy games. Are you talking management sim kind of strategy games, or are you talking World War II or like war strategy games? But if you're talking about war simulators, like that kind of strategy game, then I'd have to say Theater Europe. I love that game. It's so well made. It's a little bit of arcade action in there, but it's mainly strategy, and it's got like a really cool visual style to it, top quality. And the next question is from Mark McRae, regular contributor to this channel, and he contributes to Judge and Jury, the Amiga show, and he's added in a few other ones along the way. I appreciate all your contributions. Thank you very much. Anyway, he's got 2 questions here. He posted them on Facebook. So the first one is, when is your 90s arcade video coming out? Damn you. And what have you got planned for your playlists? Okay, so the 90s arcade video, that thing is in the works. I know you're probably thinking, why is it taking so long? It's going to be about 5 hours long, maybe even longer. I've got a feeling it's going to be much longer than that, which is slightly daunting, to be perfectly honest. I've done a lot of the groundwork though for preparing. I've got to script the whole thing. That is like where you make the video, really. You got to script it. If you don't script it, you're just going like on the fly. It's not going to work. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be like something, one of those documentaries you paid like $80 on Kickstarter for, and then you watched it and you were like, okay, that didn't turn out too well. That's what's going to happen. So I'm just taking my time. I got no rush. I don't have any deadlines. I'm not asking anybody money for it. All my stuff is on YouTube. You can just watch it whenever you want. Tons and tons of documentaries. I'm just going to make it, and it's going to come out by the end of the year though. It's coming out this year. It's a mammoth task though to make that thing, and I just have to chip away at it, and that's how that gets made. And when there's significant progress being made on it, I'll give it another update. But until then, it's just going to be made in the background. But at the latest December, at the end of this year, it's going to be out. I'm probably assuming that's going to be very accurate. And the other question is, what have you got planned for your playlists? So I've already answered that there. Basically, if you early in the video, I've got all these new shows are going to be added. As far as like, new videos on the rest of the kind of, playlists I make up, all my different shows I have and all that kind of stuff. Everything's getting new episodes all the time, so I can't really be more specific than that. I just make whatever I feel like it at the time. I write a list, but I jump around on it. I might feel like making an episode of New Retro today, but maybe tomorrow I don't really feel like it, and then I'll put it aside and it'll be half made and I'll make something else, whatever I feel like making, and then I'll come back to that. I never abandon any videos unless it was something that didn't work. I never really abandon anything, so I always come back to that. I'm usually making 3 or 4 videos at once, so that's how I do it, and then I come back and I do something else on it. And then when a video is like about 70 to 80% complete, then I just laser focus on that and finish it. So as far as like, episodes being added to playlists, basically everything I make is getting new episodes at some point. I know that's pretty vague, but that's just the reality of it. And regular commenter on the 64K channel is a man called John Ebbs. He posted on Facebook a question. This is actually pretty interesting. He asked, would it have been better if they had done a Buggy Boy style or Power Drift style conversion of the C64 version of Outrun instead of the one that was actually produced, which he feels is very subpar? I totally agree. The C64 version of Outrun is very subpar. To say it's a good game is a bit of a stretch. I was super disappointed with that when I was a kid. I still played it because that's what you did, but I like the music though. The Sid interpretation of like Magical Sound Shower and stuff like that is great, but the actual game is not very good, let's be honest. I think it's kind of hard to say. I mean, I think anything would have been better than what we got. I don't know if Buggy Boy styled or Power Drift styled game would have worked for Outrun, because they actually fundamentally different gameplay styles of racing game. Buggy Boy is different than Outrun, and Power Drift is obviously again very different than Outrun, even though they are racing games. But I understand what you mean, like a better engine basically. Definitely not the engine for Chase HQ, that's for sure. But I think anything would have been better. Maybe like the engine that they used in Outrun Europa, that Probe used later, that would have suited Outrun way more. At least it's like much more in that kind of style. That could have been very interesting. But alas, that's what we got. I've always thought about these kind of things, like all the Commodore 64 games that got, say, bad conversions. I would love to see like the modern cracking groups take a shot at remaking these games, like just from scratch, And with what everybody knows now about programming on the C64, I think they should look at like games like Outrun and Afterburner and give them another shot, and I think that would be super cool. And the next question is from the YouTube community posting. This is by W Maru. He asked two different questions. So the first one up is, when you're thrifting, do you have any holy grails you hope to find? That is easy to answer. There is no, it's nothing at all. The answer is no, because there's nothing I'm really looking for. You just don't know when you thrift. It's such an open-ended kind of game you play when you go out just searching for things. It's better not to have a holy grail, because then you'll just be endlessly disappointed, because the chance of you finding that is next to nothing, but it's never impossible. That's the thing about thrifting. You never know what you're going to find. So I don't have any holy grails. I just go and see what happens, and it's a lot more satisfying, and it's a lot more fun anyway. I don't think I'd really enjoy it if I was just specifically looking for one thing, or just had one thing on mind that I want. So anyway, there's no specific holy grails for that. Obviously, maybe you could say Commodore 64 games are holy grails for me, but I don't find them in Canada here. It's like non-existent, so no. The other question is, do you have any interest in the Steam Deck or any handheld Android PCs? Actually, yes, I do. I don't know much about any other ones specifically. I'm not like looking at these things all the time, but the Steam Deck is very interesting to me. It rings a lot of bells that I would like to own a Steam Deck, to be honest. I don't have the money for that kind of thing, so the reality of it is I can't own a Steam Deck, so it's pretty much the end of it. But I think it's a cool idea. For me personally, if I was to get a Steam Deck, if I had the money for it, I would probably use it to play retro games like games off GOG, good old games, all those ones. That would be what I used it for. I wouldn't use it to play modern games, really. So it would be a little bit of a waste, but it would be a retro PC kind of thing for me. If it did those games quite well, then obviously I'll be very interested in that if I had the money, which I don't, so the Steam Deck is out of the question. I do think it looks pretty cool though. And the next one is a Twitter question from Daz, my podcasting partner on Hands On Gaming. He cheekily asks, name 2 games you've played and enjoyed, but never got around to completing, but would really want to. So, this is a hard question, dude. Wow. I played so many games, but 2 games do come to mind. They're probably not the games that you were hoping I'd talk about. Actually, I don't even know what you would think or what anybody would think, but these are 2 games. I was looking through my collection. I went over everything briefly to see, and these 2 really stuck out. These are games that I got super far in and just didn't make it, and I regret it because they were very awesome. So let me grab them over here. So the first one up is called Lost Odyssey. It's an Xbox 360 game. It's a JRPG. It's quite excellent. It's top quality game. Even if you don't like JRPGs, you'll probably like this. Double disc game as well. So the story behind this one is, I played this game. This is a 4-disc game. I forgot about that. Wow, 4 discs on the Xbox 360. Wow, I don't remember it being that long, but yeah, so now you see why I regret it. So this game I played forever, and I got right near the end of the game, and I knew it was near the end of the game because in classic JRPG style, the map opens up, and you can, it's basically a cheeky way for JRPGs to let you go out and fight other dudes to rank yourself up if you got through the game pretty quickly. So if you fight that final boss and you die, you still got a chance to, go anywhere you want and rank yourself up to be able to beat the final boss. So this happened in that game. Right at this time when that happened, my Xbox 360, the original white one, had a red ring of death, died. So I couldn't finish it right then. And I was like in the peak of playing that game, had to send it away. It took a month to get it back. by that time I'd lost a bit of the the feel of the game, but it wasn't lost yet. But I didn't play it immediately when I came back either. It was a few weeks later, and then I went and I loaded it up and I wanted to finish it now. I didn't remember exactly where I had to go, and I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. I looked at some online forums at the time. There wasn't much information about this game, at least for like playthroughs. I couldn't figure it out. I literally couldn't find where to go. And that ended Lost Odyssey for me. So yeah, what a waste of time. Awesome game though. And the other one is a really obscure game. This is made by Origin. This is called Knights of Legend. This is the Commodore 64 version. Also came out on DOS, and maybe a couple other systems, but I just remember the C64 and DOS versions. This game is epic. It's an epic RPG. The problem with this game is I played this for months maybe, and there was an error on one of my discs, on one of the C64 discs, which often happened when it came to RPGs and prevented me from entering this one town, or was it a dungeon? Don't remember exactly. So much effort went into playing this game and I just couldn't finish it. And the problem with this game now is there's no version that I can find online to play this game, like a working version. If anybody out there knows of a working version that I can play on my C64 Maxi or whatever of Knights of Legend, and one that actually works, because there's a lot out there you can load up. None of them work at all. They all load like the beginning title screen, or that's about it. And it's unfortunate because this game is epic. And I've reached out to a couple people in the cracking group community to see if they can do a kind of a cartridge kind of version, a CRT version for us modern C64 gamers, so we can play this game again. And there's like some sort of issue with it being like the amount of memory it's used. It's on many discs. I don't even remember how many discs this thing had, but it exceeds kind of the memory. And a couple of people said they don't know how to do that. They don't think they can compress this game enough. So this game might be lost in time, not only for me finishing it, but for everybody, which is a real shame. Again, if anybody knows of a version of Knights of Legend on the Commodore 64 by Origin Systems, please, I would love to get one so I can play it. I can play it on my real C64, but just the disc access is insane. And I'm afraid that if I play it on my real 64 again, I might get super far and there might be an error on one of these discs. These discs are like 30, 40 years old at this point. So yeah, those are the two games. And the next question is from Judge Drock, another regular contributor to the C64 channel. And he's also on the Judge and Jury series and a bunch of others he's been on. So thank you, Mark, for your contribution here. His one is, give me your 5 biggest stinkers, whether you bought them or bootlegged them. I'm assuming you're just talking about Commodore 64 games here, but when you say bootleg, that's what I think about. So here's one of your favorite games. I know this is Super Pipeline 2. I know you love Super Pipeline 1, but I really like that one too. But that's not a stinker, by the way. I can give you 3 examples of stinkers on the C64 that I feel are just garbage. I don't think about bad games all the time, so I can't even think of 5. I know, offhand, that I'd actually hate. But these 3 are just total trash. I've talked about a couple of them before, mentioned them. So the UK version of Afterburner on the C64 is such a piece of garbage. It's so bad. That game could, trying to do that on the C64 was pushing your hopes anyway. I think it can be done. The US version is actually pretty decent, so it's completely different. But my friend actually bought the UK version, and this is the only game he literally bought. Every other game he had was bootlegged, and he bought the UK version of Afterburner, and we loaded it up, and we kind of cringed our way through it. We never said this game is bad, but I think we both really knew it was bad. We just didn't want to say it because I didn't want to embarrass him because it was the only original game he bought, poor guy. But anyway, That's one of them. The second two are games that are physically bought. I still have the physical copies. I'm just not showing them here, but the next one is Double Dragon, the C64 version. I'm talking about the first one. There was 2 versions made, one by Ocean, but there's one before that by Melbourne House. That's the one I'm talking about. Wow. What a piece of trash that is. It's such a bad arcade conversion. It's I've said this a few times on this channel, and I stand by it. The C64 just isn't really that good for scrolling beat 'em ups. There's like maybe 1 or 2 examples of scrolling beat 'em ups that are good, and pretty much every other one that's ever been released is terrible. Double Dragon's just another one that's awful. Terrible conversion. Just besides the beginning music, which is pretty good as usual on the C64, the game is trash. Horrible game. Terrible gameplay. Graphics are weird. It's just not good. And the final one I've mentioned many times on this channel, but it's just so bad that, you know, it has to be mentioned. That's the conversion of Chase HQ on the C64. Such a dire game. That's another game I spent money on, and man, I was disappointed. So disappointed. Terrible graphics, runs at like 1 frame a minute. It's just complete garbage. I recently played the Spectrum version of that. Daz suggested that to me, and for the Hands-On Gaming podcast, we did a 40th anniversary of the Spectrum, and he's keep on saying that it's really good, and I never believed him, but yeah, it's pretty good. I don't even know. It's 100 times better than the C64 version. So if you can get it right on the Spectrum, you couldn't get the C64 one. Come on. Another game that modern C64 programmers could probably get their teeth into and make something of it, but you know, we'll never know. And this is another post on the YouTube community page. So this is from Denny, also a regular commenter on the C64 channel, and he asked 2 different questions. The first one up is, since you started collecting games and making videos, the surge of collectors out there, has the well started to run a bit dry on games for certain systems to find? Interesting, very interesting question. I would say it's pretty much the same. It's games for systems that were hard to find are still hard to find. Games for systems that were easy to find are still easy to find. There's obviously been a slight shift in games that are, you know, like the PS2 Xbox original games used to be everywhere. Now they're getting a little bit thin. You know, when you go to thrift stores, the GameCube ones you don't even see anymore. So it's like it's slowly shifting to the next generation that you find when you go hunting. So yeah, there's definitely been a change. As far as like finding retro stuff, I don't believe that there's any, there's a lot of people collecting retro games now, much more than they used to, because of channels that, highlighting games. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. You got to understand the one simple thing here that a lot of people don't really think about, is that for every person that's starting to collect retro games, there's people that are getting rid of retro games, getting rid of their collections for various reasons. I've done it many times, for financial or just because I moved on and then I regretted it and I ended up buying the games all over again. It's what you do. But, so for everybody that's starting, there's somebody selling, and there's always deals to be found. There is a ton of YouTube videos out there, the ones that make me laugh hilariously because they're so dramatic. The ones that say, I'm not collecting video games anymore because it's too expensive and I just can't find them anymore. Everybody is, because of YouTube videos, they've made them inaccessible to me, so I'm giving up. This is a whole lot of dramatic nonsense, by the way. I'm just letting you know. There's always deals to be made, games to be found. Go to any convention, you can find tons of games for cheap. Games are expensive, games are cheap, whatever. People are selling games all the time on marketplaces. Actually, to be quite honest, collecting games right now is the easiest it's ever been. It might be a little bit more expensive than it used to be, but it doesn't have to be. You don't have to buy that game for $500. You could find it at half price or even you don't even have to buy that game. There's a million other retro games to buy. Go and buy those instead. Who cares about the $500 game? There's so much opportunity out there, so for me, I don't think there's much of a difference. And this other question is very interesting as well. Have you thought of any ideas for series or videos that didn't quite make the grade from idea to production, for example? There's been probably a few, actually. Most of them just make and they go all the way through and you end up watching them. There's a couple that I've actually, there's only one that I've actually made and I've basically almost completed a full episode and then I abandoned it and I've still got it somewhere, I think on one of my disk drives, and if I do, I'll show a little bit of footage here, but if I can find it. But it was a show, I don't even know what it was called anymore. It was based on graphic text adventure games, which is such an obscure genre to cover. And it's a genre I've always wanted to cover on this channel, but it's just so hard to cover that and make it interesting. Even like, you know, it's difficult, and I thought I'd found a formula to make it interesting, but once I'd done almost the whole episode, I just felt like nobody's going to watch this at all. And I usually don't really care about that. You know, I just throw it up and whatever happens, happens. But I really felt like nobody's going to watch this. So it's going to be like a lot of effort for nothing. And I put like a lot of effort into it. It was basically taking a text adventure game, the concept of it, and what I actually made, and go through a whole game, like from start to finish, like complete it. So it acts as kind of a walkthrough for text adventure games, but it also acts as something you could watch as like almost like a movie or story, because I was narrating what I was doing by the text that's coming up on the screen. So it's almost like it's a walkthrough, and it's almost like a video to watch. Bit of a weird concept, but I think it was okay. And I didn't never any story. I did the entire game, and then I just kind of lost it at the end, and I just didn't finish the last little bit, and it's just got abandoned. So that's one example. I think there's another example here, which is it never actually got made, but I often think about it, and I might still do it at some point. I was doing a video series about demo discs from the 90s and early 2000s, when those things were on covers of every single magazine, and you got to play so many different types of games. Because they were on demo discs, you were buying the magazine, you're getting the games for free, and you got to play a lot of games that you normally wouldn't have played. That's what the coolness of demo discs were. Like if you could say that, you know, modern games, you can just download everything and blah blah blah. It's not the same thing, because you're not going to go and download that weird game that is on the demo disc, because it's not your style. But when it's on the demo disc, you play everything. So it's a completely different mentality, and I find that very interesting. And I might still do a series on this. If anybody out there is really interested in that as a concept, playing old demo discs and just going through them, not only watching the trailers, but also playing the actual demos, and maybe even talking about the differences between the demo and the actual real version that came out later, because most of them I ended up playing anyway. So that was another concept. That one never made it to anything. It's just an idea. But, you know, if anybody's interested, we'll look further into making a series like that, because I think it could be quite cool. And this last question is from Andrew Fisher. He's a journalist. He contributed to the recent C64 40th anniversary documentary I did. Thank you very much. His question is, what is my setup for creating videos? So let me show you a few things just to give you the basics. So here's my little station. This is where I create everything. I haven't got anything high end. Everything is pretty basic. I don't believe in buying massively ridiculous expensive stuff when you can use simplistic things to do the job, especially if you exploit them to the max. So this is my Alienware Aurora R11 computer. It's a fairly recent computer. It's nothing special. It does the job of what I need it to do. It's not super expensive either, so bear that in mind. But this is my actual editing program I use. This is NCHSoft's video pad. Now there it is, NCH software, And obviously the Alienware is doing an update, of course it is, so it's ruining everything here. But anyway, this is not a fancy editing program by any means. This is pretty bare bones. It does a lot of stuff very slick and easily. That's what I like about it. It's actually very powerful if you know how to use it. You can exploit this thing to the max and get really good results. I absolutely love this thing. It works really well. It's super cheap as well. This is only like a $70 program roughly. It updates itself all the time. If you don't keep updating it, it will run like garbage, just bear that in mind. But anyway, this program is excellent. I would highly recommend it, especially price-wise. You don't have to buy a $1,000 editing system or whatever these crazy people are doing these days. None of that is necessary. You can get something simple. As far as capturing game footage goes, I use my PC to capture playing games through emulation, so that's one of the reasons, or one of the ways I use. And the thing I use to capture all like actual real systems, you know, anything real, all these systems here, all these systems there, everywhere. So I use this HD video capture. I've got a few of them spread out around this room. There's another one there. These things are super cheap as well. That's the reason I have them, because I don't have endless funds. I can't buy super expensive things. Those things are about $50 to $80 on Amazon, and they do the job. 180p capturing. Bear in mind you're playing retro games, so that is more than sufficient to get a good, nice picture for capturing on all these systems really. You don't need anything more than that. If you're going out of your way to buy one of these ridiculous capture things that are like $500, you're wasting your money. I mean, if you want to do that, go for it, but you don't have to. This does the job really well, and it's very simple. You just put a memory card in there and you press record on the red button. Done. Nothing else to it. There's nothing that has ever gone wrong. I think I've had video being corrupted once in the entire time I've used these things, and I've used these things endlessly. And in case you're getting into doing voiceovers also, this is the one I have. I have a Samsung CO1U. Okay, this is an excellent microphone. I convinced RGN to buy one of these as well because he was looking for better sound for his voiceovers, and he absolutely loves it now. That's an excellent microphone. These are not cheap ones, but they're not like super expensive. So it's like a mid-range as far as I'm concerned. Good quality though. When it comes to sound, you have to like put a little bit of extra money. But yeah, it's a pretty cheap setup I've got. Those are the main things how I create these videos. So thanks for the question. I know I could have gone into a lot more detail about it. It's this video is obviously way too long at this point. I cannot spend any more time on this question, but I really appreciate everybody's questions, and I hope I was able to answer them. And that's it. Thanks for joining me, Bastich B at 64K. I hope you had a good time, and if you can please like and subscribe, that'll be greatly appreciated, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.